Hello, welcome to Free Will, Science, and Religion. I'm Chandler Klebs, and today I'm here with my co-host Jamie Soden, and this is going to be kind of a silly podcast. We're going to be talking about, human reproduction and why does the species continue? Should it continue? And how people's need and beliefs and desire to reproduce refutes free will. What do you think, Jamie?
Well, I'm not so sure how I should discuss this. I mean, you and Trick Slattery are better at this than I am, but I'll try and start off the best I can. I mean, think how many problems could be avoided, right, if we use cloning instead of sex to reproduce and stuff. I mean, because some people use sex for the wrong reasons. For some people, it's about it's about lust, it's about power, whatever, And I'm thinking, I'm thinking, how many problems could be avoided if we just done away with sex entirely and instead used cloning, you know?
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting because, mammals, like humans, reproduce sexually, but a lot of types of life forms reproduce asexually. Like, they don't even have sex, but they reproduce anyway. So what's wrong with humans? Why do they need to have sex to reproduce?
I don't know how this came about in evolution. I'm sure that Richard Dawkins might have more insight in this than I do. Because he's a biologist and he's researched this topic for years and years. So we should you should ask him how it came about, how did male and female come about. So
Yeah, that's actually one of the biggest mysteries. Like, for me, I don't understand that. And in fact, I think that's probably one of the most mysterious things. There probably are answers. The biologists probably do have answers to that question, like you said. So that's something I probably want to bring up because I know that Trick Slattery knows a lot more about evolution than I do and stuff. But think about it. Like, okay, because we know that humans and other monkeys and other mammals, the dogs, the cats, the sheep, the cows, whatever, we know that that's how they reproduce, but that we also know that, like, there's all kinds of life forms like plants. A lot of plants reproduce without any sex involved. Now some plants require pollination, certain ones don't, and then like amoebas and protozoa, all sorts of weird tiny organisms that just reproduce by cell division, which is kind of interesting because the way humans started our lives out after the fertilization, well, then those cells keep dividing and multiplying somehow. Um,
yeah,
but you have to wonder, like, this is something that people think about it because, when we're talking about cause and effect, like,
yeah.
okay, all of us exist because there were two human parents that had sex, but then people think, well, where did the first humans come from? And I think this is a really big barrier for people when they start thinking about evolution, because a lot of people are raised in Christianity, and they believe the Adam and Eve story. So
Yeah.
their answer to that is, oh, well, God made the man out of mud and then pulled a rib from him to make a woman. And I'm like, well, I,
Incest.
incest. Well, yeah, it would be incest because remember, that Adam and Eve's kids would have had to marry each other and have sex if that
Yeah.
story was true anyway. So there's a lot of incest.
Hmm.
But I mean, think about it. Somehow, a man being made out of mud and then a woman being made out of a rib, something about that doesn't sound right. So, and I mean, I don't know about that, but whatever Richard Dawkins or Jerry Coyne might say about the evolution of how humans came to be from other previous life forms. I don't know if they're right or not, but it's still gonna whatever they tell me is gonna sound more believable than the Adam and Eve story. I know that much.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, you got to believe like the science is consistent, with the idea of the what's it called, genome.
Yeah.
Because all life forms apparently came from single-celled organisms. Uh, they became fish. Then the fish got up on land like somehow and became rodents and stuff like that.
Yeah. Anyway, I've read a lot about evolution and stuff like that, and so I know generally the stuff they say. However, I'm still not quite sure, um, like, because that the subject of evolution has been sort of a debate between George and Trick. They've sort of been talking about it because George thinks it's a conscious universal process that guides evolution, and Trick Slattery is like, oh, it's just an unconscious thing, and the mutations evolve a certain way.
Yeah,
And
I don't believe the universe is conscious. I don't really agree with George Ortega in that respect, but I do respect his opinion. Though. I mean, you can't expect everyone to agree on the same thing.
right, and this, and I want to make something clear for our listeners. And of course, there's a disclaimer in the image, that Trick made. The only thing that the co-hosts agree on, as far as the Free Will, Science, and Religion podcast, is that we understand that free will is an illusion. But that doesn't mean that we're all going to agree on everything else, But
Yeah,
but I think it's interesting. Like, I think that the whole thing about consciousness is interesting because I don't necessarily go so far as George does, with the whole pantheism and the whole universe being conscious. However, we do have a universe full of conscious living things. So what's
yeah.
the practical difference,
Well, uh, going back to the the cloning idea, I mean, in the far distant future, where we become somewhat more advanced, like if we do get that far, assuming we don't wipe ourselves out by a nuclear war before then, or some other kind of natural disaster, um, cloning would be a better method to reproduce than sex, would it? Because I mean, with sex, you've got all different kinds of problems, not just with orientation-based hatred, like where gays and bisexuals have been hated for their sexualities by religious extremists, but also you've got the issue where you have people have sociopathic disorders relating to sexuality, and they it becomes a problem for women and stuff like that.
Yeah, and here's the interesting thing is I think that sex is a terrible method of reproduction. But yeah, and I think it comes with all these problems because what
Mm.
people are missing is, like the religious people, well, they're very strict, well, that sex is only between men and women, and they have to be married, and it's a beautiful thing and all that stuff, And I'm like, well, okay, I don't believe it like they do because I mean, okay, well, what about sexually transmitted diseases? That's a
Yeah,
problem.
that's another problem I wanted to bring up about sex as well. I mean, there's so many risks involved, like with birth defects and stuff like that.
It's a problem. Yeah, there's the sexually transmitted diseases. There's birth defects, and a lot of women have died in childbirth. And especially before like C-sections were invented and all sorts of other medical stuff in these modern times was available. The mortality rate of women trying to give birth to children was high. Um,
Yeah,
and so I look at that and see, Jamie, that has a lot to do with why I have no interest in having sex or anything like that because that's just dangerous. Why would you do something that's going to hurt the woman like that?
yeah,
Because it see like I don't like that's the thing people misunderstand about me is like I
mm,
don't want women to have to endure a pregnancy. And so my solution yeah, my solution, which I thought made perfect sense, is hey, just don't have sex. It made sense to me, but people
I'm
don't
sick
like.
of no problem with it.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it either. And there's all these other people that are like, no, we have to have sex. We have no choice. It's a biological imperative. Which what they're saying is they don't have a free will.
Well,
Well, it's kind of weird because here's the deal. What they're saying is, oh, we have no choice to have sex. But here's what I'm trying to figure out, Jamie, is why we don't have that same imperative. You know? And you have to consider, Jamie, like, for example, gay people don't reproduce. So
yeah.
I've really had a hard time figuring out how people act like that, sex is a biological imperative and everybody's got to do it because they have to reproduce. But there's a
No, they don't.
lot, yeah,
They still have to endure like their orientation-based hatred from bigots. You know what I mean? Because bigots tend to say horrible things about gays, saying they're going to burn in hell for eternity because they're sinning against this imaginary creator that's never been proven to exist. Yeah.
yeah. And what's really interesting about that, Jamie, is that
Mm,
I used to be really religious, like seriously, like back when I was growing up in churches and stuff. Well, I heard that kind of stuff that homosexuality is an abomination and it's
mm,
just awful. God hates gay people. And of course occasionally there were people, well, God loves gay people, but they better stop being gay or else, like,
It's not like they've got. I mean, it's not like they've got a choice in the matter. You know what I mean? The sexuality is just hardwired. I've been seeing this over and over, like in different social media. You know, people can't just wake up the next morning and change their orientation from hetero to bi to homo. It just doesn't work like that. You know, people develop these things from adolescence, don't they?
yeah. And what's really interesting now, okay, Jamie, I don't have the exact link to this, but I read a really strange link on Facebook. Somebody posted a link to something where this article was claiming that if gay marriage is legalized, then there will be more abortions. And I'm like, how? I mean, they don't reproduce, so how is letting the gay people have a marriage license, how is that going to increase the abortions? I don't get where they're getting that from.
Mm.
Something about the sanctity of marriage and all that, and I don't know. But yeah, like my thing is, I don't see a harm. Like I don't see an actual harm with the whole gay marriage thing, and I think what here's what's going on, Jamie. This is what I think
Yeah.
is people have their definitions of the way they were taught something is. They're taught, well, marriage is this certain thing, and so we can't let it be defined as anything different, which, is similar. Just like, people have different definitions of free will, which is kind of weird because, yeah, there's different definitions, and then it becomes a game of, well, which is the right definition? Somebody could say, well, what's the correct definition? I don't know. I mean, like if we all understand what we're talking about, that's the important thing. Trick Slattery said something in one of his blog posts. In fact, yeah, seriously, man, I hope that people go read Trick Slattery's blog post. I think it's breakingthefreewillillusion.com or something like that. But he had this one post where he said that if you call the big flaming ball in the sky the moon, people are going to get really confused when you tell them that you have moonburn. It's really funny, man, because the point is that we know what the sun means. We know in generally it's agreed that the big fiery ball in the sky is called the sun, and then at
Yeah.
night the silvery ball up there when everything else is dark, we call that the moon. And so why would you call the sun moon or the moon sun? Why not use the definition that people understand? And so, like, that's my thing is, when people come up, like Daniel Dennett will come up with, like a different definition of free will, one that never was used, one completely unrelated to anything anyone's ever said before. And then there's also this problem with marriage, like we were talking about the marriage thing. Like people have this idea like, well, marriage is only between a man and a woman, so we can't let anybody change that by having people of the same gender say they're married. And I'm like, well, I don't know. And I actually am still very confused about it, Jamie. I'll admit, I really just don't get why the gay marriage debate goes on so long, other than, people's beliefs about it from their religion, because it doesn't mean anything to me. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, even straight marriage, it doesn't mean anything because people, they get married, then they get divorced. It means nothing. It's just a legal contract that they make it, they break it. And it's kind of weird because, and in a lot of religions, like, they teach that divorce is a sin. And, here's the way I look at it is that if people, they get married thinking that things are going to be a certain way, but then, like, okay, hey, here, Jamie, here's a funny example. Like, let's say two carnivores get married, okay? They're
Yeah.
both, yeah, they're both these meat-eating carnivores. Let's just say it's a man and a woman for the sake of example here. So the man and the woman, they're married and they eat meat. But
Yeah.
but then someday the man turns vegetarian because he no longer feels right about eating the flesh of these animals. So then what happens? Well, now he sees it as wrong to eat meat, and he talks to his wife about it, but she defends her carnivorous ways. So how can these people live together? You
Yeah.
know, conflicts like that come up, and that's why I don't view marriage as some kind of a thing where you marry someone and then you're stuck with them until you both die, because a lot of
Mhm.
people are better off if their parents get separated or divorced, because if all they're doing is fighting and there's just trouble all the time and kids grow up in that, well, that's not good for the kids if they've got kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just not a good environment for kids to grow up in. You don't want them growing up like scarred by the violence that they're seeing, very young,
Like, I just have to say, I was relieved when my parents got divorced. So that's where a lot of this is coming from. But yeah, like, that's the thing is, I think that there's all these different religious beliefs and traditional ideas about marriage that just people stick with these ideas even though they're not practical. And here's a thought, Jamie. Have you ever heard of a thing such as asexual marriage, where nobody's having sex but they're married?
Never heard of asexual marriage. No, that's a funny one. That I mean, when I think of marriage, I usually think of like bride and groom, like man and woman and stuff like that. And not for religious reasons. I'm just saying because there's so much of a hysteria against gay marriage. It's usually man and woman, isn't it?
Yeah, it usually is. And the way I'm looking at it is, well, this is weird because it seems like that sex always goes with marriage. Like that the reason people get married is so they can have sex. And you're not supposed to have sex when you're not married. And I'm like, so is marriage just about sex? And then if you ask them that, here's what they say. Oh no, it's not just about sex. It's about a commitment and raising children together and all that, and I'm like, but well, you only raise children if you have sex. Would
Yeah.
you?
What is this obsession? What is this obsession with sex anyway? I mean, shouldn't it be about the person and not lusting for body parts? You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that, Jamie, because like let's just say that like
mm,
people get married and then for whatever reason they find out that the person they're married to can't have sex. Like, you
mhm.
know what I mean? Like what happens if for whatever reason physically they just can't do sex? Does that mean you just throw them away and divorce them and marry somebody else because this person couldn't do some physical thing with their body that you wanted them to?
No, you do hear stories like that about like guys who have problems with their genitalia where they can't get an erection. Erectile dysfunction is it called?
Yeah, that's what they call it. Yeah, And I've thought about that. Like, I've seriously thought about that. You know, it just seems to me that, like, if marriage was to be even a thing, like, I don't know if marriage means anything to me or not, but if I was to be married, it would be something that would work even if there was no sex involved. But you never hear of that, do you? You never hear of somebody marrying somebody that they don't intend to have sex with. And so what I think is, I think that sex has really screwed the world up.
Just seem to have an obsession with it, and I mean, you're not gonna be able to do it forever. I mean, like women are gonna get menopause eventually, like when they get to a certain age, you know. Yeah.
And you know what's so interesting, Jamie, is this whole thing about sex. Well, it shows that people don't. It's just more evidence against free will. Because think about it, where do people get their ideas about sex? They get it from the culture around them, obviously. They're taught
Yeah.
certain things about what marriage is. They're taught, you have to be taught. If you believe gay marriage is wrong, well, somebody probably taught you that it was wrong.
Yeah, I don't believe it's wrong, but there are obviously some people out there who do believe it's wrong, and they need to be told that, they need to be asked the question, why is it wrong? You need to get them to critically think about the issue,
Yeah. And that's the interesting thing, is that's what we're all about, Jamie. That's what this whole no free will thing helps. It helps us look at the causality, about why are people the way they are. Why do they do the things they do? Why do they believe the things they do? And you see that they don't choose their sexuality. You'll see that they don't choose their beliefs about sexuality, but instead it gets passed down to them from their parents, from their religion, from the surrounding culture, even what you see on TV. So you would say that, like, my views on it have changed from, like, back when I was a teenager hearing about this stuff, and everyone's like, oh, well, like, they say, well, sex before marriage is wrong, and homosexuality is wrong. But I'm like, well, why is it wrong? They would just say something about, oh, well, it's not God's design. And I'm like, well, then why is it happening?
I don't know, man.
And seriously, Jamie, you have to wonder, why do people reproduce?
We reproduce to carry on the species. That's all it's there for, really.
Yeah, and I mean, we know that we're only here because our ancestors felt very sexy. That's why we're here. but you but you have to wonder, well, like, let's say, Jamie, let's just say, for the sake of example, let's suppose that humans did not reproduce by sex. Let's say that they could clone and reproduce when they wanted to, but they only reproduced when they wanted to, and sex had nothing to do with it. What do you think would happen to the human race?
Could you repeat that question? Sorry, it is a bit late in the evening.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. Let's say that people reproduce by cloning, like you were talking
Yeah.
about, but that sex had nothing to do with it. So having sex didn't make people reproduce. They had to do something else to reproduce. What do you think would happen to the population? Do you think it would increase or decrease?
Well, it'll probably decrease because, reproduction by cloning probably wouldn't be as fun, like in some people's eyes. So then you'll have an issue where, some people will just opt out of doing it because it wouldn't be as appealing to them. Yeah.
Yeah, because what I'm finding, Jamie, from everything I hear and read, it turns out that people, well, they don't want to have kids, but they just want to do sex. That's why I think the two should be separated.
Yeah, completely separate issues, having a kid and having sex are two different things, Like one has got like a huge burden of responsibility to go with it.
Yeah, and here's how I think about it. Like I have certain dreams. Like, well, it would be kind of cool, like, if I adopted somebody someday, or let's say I married a woman who already had kids, or something like that. I've just thought about it. It's not in any plan or anything, but I just thought about that, and I'm like, I'm fine with that, because in my case, I kind of like the idea of being a father to kids who don't already have a father, because I didn't have a father. You know what I mean? So I just kind of, that's how I look at it. But at the same time, I don't want to have sex, because I don't want to make more kids. I just want to improve the lives of kids that are already here.
I want the lives of people to improve, but you know, there's a lot of problems in the world that need to be solved. I mean, climate change is just one of many. You know.
Yeah. Although here's what I would say, and I think George would agree with this, is well, climate change is a pretty big one because
Hmm.
if it's not stopped somehow, well, it's going to kill so much life on the planet and just cause a such a major catastrophe that I think it is kind of a priority. You know what I mean?
But we've still got other natural disasters that could happen. You know, we got well, if the Gulf Stream stops, we're gonna have like severe weather changes. When the sun gets too hot, we'll all be doomed anyway, unless we move off this planet on, you know, to somewhere else.
Yeah, that would be weird. You know what we'll have to do sometime in another podcast is what we'll have to talk about is there life on other planets and will we ever live on other planets and stuff like that. Yeah, but yeah, I mean climate change is big. There's all sorts of environmental problems that
Hmm.
and so I think that this whole thing about marriage, people being upset about gay marriage being legalized. I think that's a minor issue. I think there's bigger issues. And so that's kind of the thing is I think this has
Hmm.
gone on for so long and people keep debating about that and I see it and I'm like, well, what's the problem? So it's sort of I'm like I'm kind of like the dude who's like, well, I'm not gay and
Hmm.
I'm not looking to get married to anybody of any species or color or gender or anything like that. So the
Yeah.
reason so the reason that I'm for legal gay marriage is not because of how I feel about it. It's just because hey, that's what the people want. Give it to them because I don't see any harm.
Yeah. But you are right though. There are other issues that take priority, and climate change is one. And there's another problem. Like you got like extreme poverty in third world countries where people are starving, dying of diseases and stuff. And you've also got like undeveloped countries with the problem of child brides and all that stuff. You know, you need to stop all that crap. You know, because that's wrong.
Yeah, seriously, man. But yeah, let's see, because this like if you think about it, if people had a free will, wouldn't it be easier for them to just get over these strange beliefs? But it just shows that these people are not able to shake off their beliefs about marriage and about sex. And see, they believe that they have to have sex.
Yeah.
That's what life is about. They're obsessed with it. So here's what I say. I say it's like any other addiction. They are so addicted to it
Hmm.
that the very thought that somebody would ever live without sex is just unheard of to them. It's sort
Yeah.
of like there's those people who say, well, humans can't live if they don't eat meat. They have to eat meat to survive, which you've got plenty of vegetarians and vegans who live long and healthy to prove that it's not required for a human to live.
You don't need meat to survive, and the fact that there are vegetarians proves that fact. You know, and you can get protein in vegetarian diets. You get it from nuts, and you can get it from bamboo as well.
Yeah, you know what? I like cashews. Like cashews are my favorite nut. But then I also eat a lot of peanuts because they're really cheap. And then I like granola. Like granola. It's usually oats and other grains and stuff.
Yeah,
And so it's kind of cool because that's kind of like what horses eat.
yeah.
Yeah. Like one, did I tell you I tried to eat horse food?
Oh,
Yeah, seriously, I was out at this woman's farm, and she was feeding the horses, and so I took a handful of the grain that we were about to feed to the horses, and I tried to eat it, and I had a
mhm,
hard time chewing it. However, it was fine. I liked it, but it was just hard to chew. So that's the
mhm,
kind of thing that
mhm.
it needs to be soggy. Then I could eat it. So that's the kind of thing is I would like to have that stuff and put it in some almond or coconut milk in a bowl. And so then wait for it to get soft and then eat it. But yeah, seriously, I could eat horse food. And I could probably eat bird seed too. You know, the seeds they feed to birds.
Yeah.
I could eat that.
That's fine. I mean, me and my family, right? The other week we made this homemade flapjack with oats and honey. Like it was real nice. I mean, you should try it sometime. And in place of butter, we used I think it was coconut oil or something like that, coconut fat, whatever.
Yeah, my mom uses coconut oil to cook things. It's really healthy.
And yeah, that stuff's supposed to be better for you than butter is. And we used that in place of like margarine or butter, whatever. And that flapjack tasted really nice. I mean, I think she put nuts in it. I can't even remember the ingredients now. I'll have to go back and check. But you know, we used I know we used dates. You know the fruit dates.
Yeah, I know there's a fruit called dates.
They're nice and sweet they are. Yeah, very sticky though.
Hey, but you know what, man? This is really funny. I'm enjoying this because, we started this podcast, but, we're just talking about everything. You
Hmm.
know, there's all sorts of fun stuff to talk about. And, well, it just goes to show you, though, how the causes of why people do things, why
Hmm.
they believe that they have to have sex, they believe that marriage is only between a man and a woman. They believe that you have to eat meat to survive. And it's crazy. And these things are false, but people believe them because that's what they're told.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they call it brainwashing, don't they? And the fact that people can be brainwashed is just one of many examples of why we don't have free will. Because if you had a free will, you wouldn't be brainwashed about anything.
Yeah, like think about it. Like it's not like that people have some way of knowing what's true. Like when you're a kid and you're told something by your family or taught it in school or whatever, you have no way of knowing whether it's right. It's all you've heard, so you don't have any comparison.
Yeah, it's like with the Westboro Baptist Church members. I mean, they grew up in they grew up in an environment where people were extremely ignorant to issues surrounding homosexuality and the very nature of our existence and stuff.
Yeah, and really, it's really sad. I've seen videos about the Westboro Baptist Church, and they're
Hmm.
and they're literally taught the most awful stuff that,
Yeah,
God hates the world, God hates gay people, and all this
they even
crazy
they,
stuff.
they even taught that to little kids, and that's disgusting. You know, what I mean, telling kids to hate gays. You know, kids as young as 4, I believe.
Yeah, that's just awful, man. They're teaching
Yeah.
hatred to these kids, and some of them get out of it though. Some of them, they stay that way, but then some of them they grow up and they leave. Like, have you heard of Nathan Phelps?
Yeah, he's the son of Fred Phelps, right?
That's right. I've listened to him on podcasts before.
And he doesn't seem, you know, a lot of people become resentful to fathers like that, but for some reason he didn't hate his father. He just, he just, I think he said he felt sorry for him.
Yeah. And you
Mm,
know what, Jamie? Here's what I think that is. The reason why I think that Nathan doesn't hate his father is because he doesn't blame him. That's
mm,
because I think maybe he gets it that his father is a victim of this religious indoctrination too. His father taught this stuff because he believed it. For something caused him to believe that stuff, and
yeah.
this has been going on long before Fred Phelps. There's been all sorts of hatred tied in with various religions and stuff like
Mm,
that. And so
yeah.
yeah, I think it's because Nathan is able to see his father as a
Mm,
victim also, that he doesn't hate him. And you know what? I'll
mm,
tell you, Jamie, that's how I feel about my father too. That's how I feel about a
mm,
lot of people. They've hurt me, but I don't hate them and I don't seek revenge because I understand that they didn't choose to do what they did. And I think that if they had truly understood what they were doing, they probably wouldn't have been doing.
even though what your father did was very terrible, though. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and but I'm not the only one, and Nathan's not the only one who's had a bad father. I mean, a lot of people have had bad, abusive fathers, and they have had no fathers, and
Hmm.
so that's something a lot of us can relate to. We've all had somebody, maybe not our father, but somebody in our life that's hurt us in the past, and they've
Yeah.
done damage that we may never recover from until death, of course, because then it's over. But that's the thing is it enables you to not hate them, so where you don't seek revenge. So I think that's the benefit of overcoming belief in free will. That's the number one major benefit, and that's why I'm part of this project.
So instead of like having you know, a desire for revenge or having extreme hatred for these people, you rather just want to avoid contact with these people, you know, for your safety as well as theirs, and that way no conflict happens.
Yeah, that's totally right, man. That there's it's such a benefit to overcoming this belief that people self-cause their own thoughts and desires and stuff like that because we see the evidence that it's false. We see that
Yeah,
people don't choose even their beliefs, they don't choose their sexual orientation. So that's why, yeah, I don't hate anybody. And that, if we could, when people get that, it changes their whole world. It just
yeah.
changes the way that they
It's
treat people.
it's as Susan Blackmore said, you know, our choices are part of an evolutionary process, something along them lines.
Yeah, man. So this is really good. In fact, you know what? We've been going on this podcast for almost 40 minutes. So what I think I'll do is I'll want to wrap it up and end this episode, and then after that we could just talk or whatever.
Us not having a free will, right? Does that mean that even my music preferences were not chosen?
That's right. That
Hmm.
that's another topic we'll have to talk out about in another podcast, I guess, about why do people like the certain music they do or not. Yeah. Okay. Well, people, you've been listening to the Free Will, Science, and Religion podcast. This has been me, Chandler, and my friend Jamie Soden, and we've been talking about a whole bunch of topics. So I hope you found something interesting. We're having a lot of fun. Bye for
Yeah.
now.